On a luxurious Maui resort, Bianca finds herself in the same room and the same bed with the man she can't afford to desire. Blake Harrington, the ruthless, powerful heir to her company's biggest rival. As night swallows the light and professional boundaries crumble, one night of passion sparks a fire neither of them was prepared for. By morning, they are competitors once again, fighting over the same author, the same success. How do you forget the touch of someone who should be your enemy? And what happens when a forbidden night becomes impossible to forget? Which country are you watching this story from? Have you ever fallen for someone completely out of reach? Because some mistakes are worth repeating. Bianca Mitchell never imagined that stealing a bed could bring her so much trouble. The luxurious resort on Maui's North Shore shimmered in the fading sun, and Bianca, exhausted from a 12-hour flight from New York, dragged herself to the front desk. Her straight dark hair fell freely over her shoulders, and the wrinkles in her blue dress told their own story of the discomfort endured in economy class. "Excuse me, Miss Mitchell," the front desk attendant said with practiced sympathy, "but it seems there's an issue with your reservation." Bianca forced a smile. As the new junior editor at Pinnacle Publishing, she had been sent to Hawaii to convince the reclusive author Wesley Grant to meet and finish his long overdue manuscript. This trip was her chance to prove her worth. Sleeping in a car was not an option. "What's the problem?" she asked, already sensing trouble. "We're fully booked because of the International Writers Retreat. I can arrange accommodation at our partner hotel, but it's 30 minutes away." Bianca glanced at her watch. Her meeting with Wesley was set for 8 a.m. "There's absolutely nothing here? Not even one room?" the receptionist typed quickly. "There is one room that was reserved but never checked in. The guest never arrived and we missed the hold time." "I'll take it," Bianca said without hesitation. 20 minutes later, she swiped the key card and entered a room that could only be described as outrageously luxurious. An ocean view suite, a massive bed draped in Egyptian cotton, a private terrace, and amenities she had only seen in magazines. "Just for one night," she whispered, dropping her bags and heading straight for the shower. Warm water cascaded over her tired muscles, steam filling the glass enclosure. Wrapped only in the luxurious robe clinging to her damp skin, Bianca settled on the bed, surrounded by her notes on Wesley Grant's manuscript. His troubled protagonist needed deeper development, and she had prepared detailed suggestions. Exhaustion took over immediately, and she drifted to sleep, leaving her notes scattered across the vast mattress. Then, the sharp sound of the door opening jolted her awake. A tall figure filled the doorway. "What the hell?" a deep voice demanded. Bianca sprang up, pressing the sheet to her chest as her robe had loosened in her sleep. "Who are you? How did you get in here?" The man turned on the light, and his presence dominated the room. Over 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered, tapering into a narrow waist, his powerful frame hinted at strength beneath his business trousers. His sculpted face, strong jaw, full lips pressed into a line, piercing green eyes, surveyed her disheveled form. "Blake Harrington, this is my room," he said, his voice dark honey, soft but edged with danger. "That's impossible. The front desk gave me this room because you didn't check in on time." Bianca felt the chill of the air on her bare legs beneath the robe, one shoulder nearly exposed, her heartbeat racing as the air crackled with tension. "I called specifically to say my flight's delayed," Blake said, loosening his tie with one hand, a gesture that somehow felt casual and intimate at the same time. Fantastic. Exactly what I needed after 20 hours of travel. Suddenly, clarity struck Bianca like a lightning bolt. Blake Harrington, the heir to the Harrington publishing empire, the biggest rival to Pinnacle, the sworn enemy of her boss, the very man whose company had spent months trying to poach Wesley Grant. And here she was, in his hotel room, wrapped in a robe that suddenly felt far too thin to hide her nervousness. "I'll call the front desk," she suggested, reaching for the phone, trying to ignore how his presence seemed to shrink the room around her. 10 agonizing minutes later, the response came. The hotel was fully booked. A convention, a wedding, and a writer's retreat had taken every room. "I could go to another hotel," Bianca offered reluctantly, the thought of wandering a strange island at 1 a.m. making her stomach twist with fear. Blake glanced at his watch and exhaled slowly. "Listen, it's late. His eyes met hers, glinting with danger. "The bed is huge. I have an important meeting in the morning, and I imagine you do too. We're both adults." "You want to share a bed?" Bianca exclaimed, heat rising to her cheeks at the mere idea. "Or would you rather sleep in the lobby?" he countered, his gaze flicking briefly to the spot where her robe had slipped, revealing her collarbone. I promised myself I'd stay on my side, Bianca thought, weighing the pros and cons. Sharing a bed with the heir of a rival? Not ideal. But missing a meeting that could make or break her career because of a long journey? Equally absurd. "Fine," she agreed, "but there have to be rules." "Of course," Blake replied, a corner of his mouth lifting in a teasing smirk. His face, already striking, now seemed dangerously magnetic. "You take a shower. I'll pick something other than this robe," she said, her skin tingling as she gathered her pajamas and waited for him to enter the bathroom. The sound of running water fueled her imagination, how it would cascade over his sculpted body. She shook her head and quickly changed into a thin silk pajama set with shorts, the only clothing she'd brought for what she thought would be a solitary trip. Suddenly, it felt entirely inappropriate. When Blake emerged, steam following him, he was wearing only pajama pants low on his hips, revealing tanned, chiseled muscles. Water droplets still gleamed on his chest. Bianca forced herself to look away. "Your turn," he said, his voice deeper, rougher than before. By the time she returned from brushing her teeth, Blake had constructed a wall of pillows on the bed, separating them. "Your fortress, my lady," he said with mock seriousness, but the way he looked at her in silk spoke volumes. Despite herself, Bianca laughed. They settled on opposite sides of the bed, a barrier of pillows between them. The tension in the room was almost tangible. Finally, Blake broke the silence. "What brings you to Maui?" "Work," Bianca said carefully. "The same important client meeting." Another silence, filled only by their breathing. "This is ridiculous," Blake muttered. "Let's admit it. We're both here because of Wesley Grant." Bianca sat up, the blanket slipping from her. "How did you know?" "Your notes are still scattered all over the bed." "I can read upside down," he said, propping himself on his elbow, studying her with an intensity that was almost dangerous. "You're from Pinnacle, and you're trying to poach our author." "I prefer to call it giving him the best possible opportunity," Blake countered, his voice dropping low, almost hypnotic, as if he were trying to break through her resistance. "Harrington Publishing has resources that Pinnacle can only dream of. And what we lack in resources, we make up for with real work on the manuscript," Bianca replied, leaning forward without even realizing it. "Wesley's manuscript needs editing, not a bigger advance." To her surprise, Blake laughed, and the sound sent a strange shiver down her spine. "You're refreshingly stubborn. Usually everyone just agrees with me. I suppose you must be tired of being around people like that." "You couldn't possibly know." His voice sounded so genuine that Bianca found herself scrutinizing him more closely. In the soft lamp light, his features softened, almost inviting. Their conversation drifted effortlessly from publishing deals to the books they loved, to recommendations from past travels. Somewhere between debating the merits of first-person narration and discovering a shared love for mysteries, the invisible barricade of caution began to crumble. Blake reached out, brushing his fingers against hers. The contact sent tiny electric sparks shooting up her arm. Their eyes met across the fallen pillows, and for a moment, neither moved. "We should probably get some sleep," Bianca whispered, though sleep was far from her mind. "Probably," Blake agreed, making no effort to restore the barrier, or move his hand that now rested just inches from hers. She switched off the lamp, plunging them into darkness, where feeling outweighed seeing. The warmth of his presence on the mattress was magnetic. She felt the heat of his body pressing close. "Good night, Bianca Mitchell," he murmured, his voice a caress in the dark. "Good night, Blake Harrington," she replied. Morning sunlight streamed through curtains they'd forgotten to close. Bianca woke slowly, feeling unfamiliar warmth against her back, a solid chest pressed to hers. Somehow, overnight, she had ended up on his side, or he on hers. His hand had already curled around her waist, the palm resting possessively on her stomach. His breath grazed her neck, sending tingling shivers down her spine. For a fleeting moment, she allowed herself to savor how perfectly their bodies fit together, the intoxicating scent of him filling her senses. Reality crashed back. In 45 minutes, she had a meeting with Wesley Grant, and she had just spent the night in the close embrace of her biggest competitor. Carefully disentangling herself, ignoring her body's protests, Bianca gathered her things and headed to the bathroom, preparing for the most important meeting of her career. Armed with insider knowledge of the competitor's offer and a heightened awareness of her own instincts, there was no time for lingering thoughts. She didn't notice Blake watching her through half-lidded eyes, desire and calculation warring in his gaze. Harrington Publishing's heir had learned something valuable overnight and discovered something he hadn't been looking for. The publishing war over Wesley Grant had suddenly become much more interesting, and Blake Harrington never lost battles he truly wanted to win. Bianca arrived at the beach cafe 5 minutes early, professionalism masking her exhaustion after a restless night. She chose an elegant black dress that radiated confidence while allowing ease in the tropical heat. Her dark hair was swept into a sophisticated bun. Wesley Grant did not match her expectations. The literary genius behind Shadows of Existence was a tanned man in his 60s with graying temples, wearing shorts, looking more like a surf instructor than a philosopher of novels. "Ms. Mitchell," Wesley greeted her with a firm handshake. "Your notes were thorough." Bianca felt her heart drop. Too critical? No, Ryan, or rather Wesley, laughed, his eyes crinkling with a smile. "Exactly what I needed. My characters have been stuck for months." Relief washed over her as they sat at a table overlooking the ocean. Bianca began sharing her vision for his novel, explaining how strengthening the protagonist's motivation could unlock the entire story. "You get what I'm saying," Wesley nodded approvingly. "That's rare." Everything was going perfectly, until a familiar voice cut through the moment. "Wesley, long time, no see!" Blake's deep timbre made Bianca flinch almost involuntarily. "Blake!" Wesley exclaimed, standing to embrace the newcomer. Tension coiled in Bianca's stomach. She knew this was only the beginning. "I didn't expect you until 11. I wrapped up my morning meetings early," Blake said, his gaze locking with hers as he slid into the seat beside her. Linen trousers and a crisp white shirt highlighted his tan, making him look like he'd just stepped off a yacht. The scent of his expensive woody cologne instantly transported Bianca back to mornings spent waking in his arms. "Looks like you two already know each other," Wesley said, oblivious to the electric tension. "We do," Blake replied, his knee brushing against hers under the table. Even through the fabric, the touch ignited a flame that ran up her thigh. Bianca forced a professional smile. "We met last night," she said carefully. Blake's eyes darkened as he echoed her words. "Met?" His voice dropped low, dangerous, as if reminding her of exactly how they had intertwined. "You could put it that way," she murmured. Wesley watched them curiously. "Well, that's convenient. I'd planned to speak to you both separately about the proposals, but maybe we should discuss everything together." "Actually," Bianca began. "Great idea," Blake cut in, flashing a predatory smile. "I've always preferred direct competition." The next hour was agonizing. Blake outlined the Harrington Publishing proposal flawlessly. Bigger money, a global marketing campaign, film rights. His confidence was irritating and undeniably magnetic. When it was her turn, Bianca emphasized Pinnacle's dedication, personalized approach, and track record of successfully promoting authors. "The question," she said, holding his gaze, "is whether you want to be seen as a product or an artist."
That's an interesting perspective.
Blake's jaw tightened.
I'm glad you
The
think
real
so.
question is whether you want a
Definitely.
publisher with the resources to make
should
your
do this
work
again.
known worldwide, or someone who keeps you comfortable but limits your potential. Wesley looked impressed by their duel. "You've both given me a lot to think about. I'll need until the weekend to decide." When they escorted Wesley to his car, Blake's hand brushed Bianca's lower back for a moment. Whether accidental or not, she felt the faint weight of ownership in that touch. "Dinner tonight?" Blake asked. "There's a great restaurant nearby." "Not tonight," Wesley said. "I promised my daughter I'd attend her exhibition opening. But you two can spend some time together and exchange plenty of business ideas. I'm sure there's a lot to discuss." Before they could object, Wesley drove off, leaving them alone in the parking lot. "Well," Blake said, turning to her. "That was interesting." Bianca crossed her arms. "Using our situation to gather info on Pinnacle's offer isn't exactly fair." "The woman who slept in my bed and then tried to steal my client," Blake teased. That wasn't your bed, and he's not your client, yet. A slow smile spread across Blake's face. I like your fire, Bianca Mitchell. The compliment caught her off guard. I'm not trying to impress you. That's exactly why you provoke it, he said, stepping closer, invading her personal space so that her pulse raced. Have dinner with me tonight. To extract information about the proposal again? She scoffed. To look at you across the table instead of through a barrier of pillows. His voice dipped into that dangerous magnetic tone she remembered all too well. Or are you afraid? Afraid of you? Hardly. Not me, Blake corrected, his eyes darkening. Afraid to admit you felt it too. The sunlight suddenly felt scorchingly hot on her skin. Felt what exactly? Instead of answering, Blake reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face. The simple touch sent a lightning bolt down her spine. This, he whispered. The same thing that brought you into my arms this morning. Bianca stepped back, needing space from his intoxicating presence. One dinner. Professional boundaries. Of course, he agreed, though his eyes told another story. The resort restaurant, famous for its cuisine, overlooked the ocean. Tables were arranged for privacy, soft lighting creating an atmosphere that could only be described as romantic. Bianca wore a deep red dress that hugged her figure perfectly. She told herself it had nothing to do with the flicker of admiration in Blake's eyes when she had met him in the lobby. You look stunning, Harrington, she said, assessing his elegant suit and open-collared shirt that revealed a tantalizing glimpse of tanned skin. As do you, Mitchell, he replied, his gaze slowly tracing her form as if his touch could follow. Sitting across from him with a glass of wine in hand, Bianca struggled to remember why this dinner had seemed like a bad idea. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, from publishing news to favorite authors, and their shared passion for literature was obvious. How did you get into publishing? She asked, genuinely curious about the person behind the corporate image. Blake swirled his wine thoughtfully. Family business. 4 generations of Harringtons ran the company. So you had no choice? Something flickered in his eyes. Everyone has a choice. I chose to embrace my inheritance, not fight it. And if it hadn't been publishing? Architecture, he answered without hesitation. I've always been fascinated by how spaces affect people. He leaned forward. And you? Always dreamed of editing other people's words? The question sounded like genuine interest, not mockery. I wanted to be a writer, Bianca admitted, but in college I realized I'm better at helping others find their voice than defining my own. Blake studied her face intently. I don't believe that for a second. You know exactly who you are, Bianca Mitchell. The intensity of his gaze made her breath hitch. You don't know me. I know you fight for what matters to you. I know your language skills are brilliant. Your notes on Wesley's manuscript prove it. I know you curl up into a warm little ball when you sleep. His voice dropped, intimate, dangerous. Bianca felt heat rush to her cheeks. That's circumstantial, she stammered. Blake reached across the table, his fingers sliding over hers. There were plenty of pillows you could have curled into. Suddenly, the restaurant felt too warm, too small. We need to talk about something else, like how you're going to handle losing Wesley Grant for Harrington Publishing. The abrupt shift to business was like a cold splash of water. You're confident, she said. Always, he replied. One word, layered with meaning, his eyes hinting at all the other things he was certain of. They began to eat, but Bianca felt her gaze drifting, almost against her will, to Blake's hands, strong, confident hands, the same hands that had claimed her so possessively the night before. You can't take your eyes off me, Blake observed, a subtle smirk lifting the corner of his mouth. Professional assessment, she replied smoothly. Just trying to find your weak spots. Found any? His voice carried a teasing challenge. Bianca leaned forward. A few. Let's start with your overconfidence. Confidence, he corrected, eyes glinting. Semantics. Details matter in our business, she countered. Blake's gaze drifted to her lips. For instance, the fact that you haven't told our colleagues about last night, even though it could have given you a significant advantage. Bianca froze. How do you know I haven't? Because I haven't received any angry calls from legal, which means you're keeping our encounter a secret. His smile was loaded with meaning. An interesting choice for someone so devoted to her company.
So that's my take on it.
Realization hit her.
I see what you mean.
Why
That's an
hadn't she
interesting
reported it?
perspective.
Professionalism
I'm
demanded
glad you think so.
documentation, distance,
Definitely.
detachment.
We should do this again.
Maybe, Blake continued, his voice dipping into that intimate tone that seemed to bypass her mind and speak directly to her body. You're hiding something. Curiosity mingled with desire, hanging in the air like a dare. Before she could craft a reply that didn't sound like an admission, dessert arrived. Chocolate souffle demanded attention, but all Bianca could focus on was Blake's intense gaze and the memory of his skin against hers. After dinner, tropical rain fell suddenly, then just as quickly ceased. They stood under the restaurant's covered entrance, watching the streams of water reshape the resort grounds. We could run, Bianca suggested, glancing toward their building. Blake shook his head. You'll ruin the dress. Better to wait a few minutes. Rain drummed harder on the roof above. They were alone. Everyone else had left or stayed inside with drinks. I've never asked, Blake said suddenly. Why Wesley Grant? Why is his book so important to you? His genuine curiosity surprised her. His work changed my life, Bianca admitted. I read his first novel in college when I was struggling with myself and the world. His words made me feel less alone. Blake studied her face, clearly impressed. You truly value the work itself. That's the point of publishing, isn't it? To find the right words and deliver them to the right reader at the right time. Supposedly, she agreed, noticing a shift in his expression. But in our world, that's rare. Before she could respond, Blake stepped closer, his hand brushing her cheek. You captivate me, Bianca Mitchell. Her heart raced, threatening to burst from her chest. This is a terrible idea. Absolutely, he agreed, his finger grazing her lower lip. Tell me to stop. She should have. She really should have. Instead, Bianca rose onto her toes, closing the final gap between them. Their lips met in a kiss that began gently but quickly, became something far more demanding. Blake's arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her into the hard planes of his body, while her hands traced his chest to his shoulders. He tasted like chocolate and wine, like forbidden desire. The kiss deepened, his hand slid along her back, holding her as if afraid she might vanish. Bianca's fingers tangled in his hair, their bodies melding as if made for each other. When they finally broke apart, gasping, the rain had stopped, leaving the night crackling with electricity. Well, Blake said, his voice rougher than ever, that wasn't in my business plan. Bianca couldn't help laughing, the tension easing slightly. Nor in mine, she admitted. His gaze darkened as he studied her flushed face, lingering on her lips still slightly swollen from his kiss. Maybe we should go inside, he said. Maybe, she agreed, taking no step away from him. Blake took her hand, his finger tracing her palm, with a tenderness far more intimate than the kiss they had just shared. What happens when we get back to the room, Bianca? The question hung in the air, heavy with endless possibilities. Professional boundaries, career consequences, and loyalty to the company battled with the undeniable pull between them. I don't know, she admitted honestly, but I think we'll find out soon enough. As they walked back to their shared room, hands still intertwined, Bianca knew what awaited them would change everything, her career, her principles, and without doubt, her heart. The walk felt endless, charged with electricity, every accidental touch of their fingers sparking a thrill as if ready to ignite. The key to Blake's room trembled in his hand as he unlocked the door, a subtle reminder that his composure was not as flawless as it seemed. The room was exactly as they had left it that morning. The enormous bed remained unmade, a lone pillow silently recalling the way they had reached for each other during the night. Blake closed the door behind them. The click sounded final, deliberate. Bianca stood in the center of the room, suddenly aware of uncertainty, despite the wine and desire burning through her veins. We need to talk about this, she said, trying to sound braver than she felt. Blake approached slowly, giving her a moment to step back. About what? She asked, though she already knew. The tension between them, the unspoken rules of their rivalry. Not about anything else. His voice dropped dangerously low as he stopped right in front of her, so close she could feel the warmth radiating from him. Not about whether we're attracted to each other. Not about what will happen if we give in. Bianca swallowed hard. This complicated everything. Life was complicated. His hand rose, brushing her cheek. His touch was almost weightless. Business was complicated. His finger traced the contour of her lower lip, and her breath caught. "This is the simplest thing I've felt in years," he murmured, sincerity cutting through any pretension of seduction. "Blake, tell me you don't want this," she whispered, challenging him softly. "Say it and I'll sleep on the couch. We go back to being just competitors." Bianca knew that should be the right choice. Her career, her reputation, her responsibility to Pinnacle demanded it. Instead, she rose onto her tiptoes, closing the final inches between them. "I can't," she breathed, touching his lips. "I can't say it." The admission shattered the last barrier of restraint in Blake. His lips found hers in a kiss that was nothing like the tentative brush before dinner. It was hunger, need, and something far deeper, something that made Bianca almost lose her balance as his hands wrapped around her waist, lifting her slightly to align their bodies. Her hands slipped into his dark hair, strands sliding through her fingers as she pulled him closer, deepening the kiss. A low groan escaped Blake's lips, reverberating through her entire body. When they broke apart, both were breathless. Blake pressed his forehead to hers. "Are you sure about this? Once we cross this line?" His voice wavered, revealing something new. Doubt. This strong, confident man suddenly seemed human, and Bianca felt it touch her heart. "I'm sure about tonight," she said honestly. "Tomorrow, that's tomorrow's problem." Something flickered in Blake's eyes. Sincerity in his voice made something stir in Bianca's chest, something far more dangerous than mere attraction. She leaned her head against his chest, hiding her expression as a surprising warmth spread through her. "What happens in Maui stays in Maui," she suggested, trying to lighten the suddenly intense atmosphere. Blake's hand froze on her back. "Do you want this?" The question hung between them, loaded with unspoken tension neither was ready to confront. Bianca closed her eyes, listening to the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear. "I don't know what I want beyond right now," she admitted quietly. "Everything else is too complicated." His grip tightened. "Then let's just focus on now." They spent the rest of the night together, slower this time, with deliberate care, like explorers mapping a territory they might never return to. When sleep finally claimed them, they stayed close, needing no pillows, no pretense of professional distance. Morning came with harsh sunlight streaming through windows they'd forgotten to close. Bianca woke first, briefly disoriented by the weight of Blake's arm around her waist, his presence protective, grounding. Reality hit with relentless clarity. Today was her last chance to convince Wesley Grant to sign the contract with Pinnacle. Her phone showed 3 missed calls, and an urgent email from her boss blinked on the screen. The real world had intruded on their stolen time. She carefully freed herself from Blake's embrace, gathered scattered clothes, and rushed to the bathroom. Under the shower, she tried to wash away the whirlwind of emotions, the complexity threatening her focus. One night, that was all. A sudden lapse in restraint, surrendering to the undeniable chemistry that had been building from the moment they entered the same room. Now she had to become Bianca Mitchell, junior editor at Pinnacle Publishing, not the woman who had discovered that beneath Blake Harrington's controlled exterior was a force as intense as her own. When she stepped out of the bathroom, dressed in a crisp blue sheath dress that felt like armor, Blake was already awake, sitting at the edge of the bed with his phone in hand. He looked up, his expression unreadable. "My team just informed me that Wesley Grant scheduled the meeting for noon," he said, his voice carefully professional. "With both of us?" Bianca asked, seizing a neutral topic. "Yes, exactly," he replied. A brief, awkward silence settled between them. The intimacy of last night gave way to the morning reality. "About us, last night," they both began, then stopped. Blake gestured for her to continue. Bianca took a deep breath. "Last night was something," she said carefully. "But today we're competitors again." Something flickered in his eyes. Disappointment? Relief? She couldn't tell. "Agreed," he said, rising from the bed with the effortless grace of someone born into privilege and power. "In love and in publishing, all's fair." The statement lingered, charged with unspoken undertones neither was ready to explore. "See you at noon," Bianca said, gathering her notes and laptop. "May the best publisher win." Blake's smile didn't reach his eyes. Indeed. The beachfront restaurant where Wesley had scheduled the meeting buzzed with lunchtime activity. Bianca arrived first, choosing a table with a view of both the entrance and the rolling waves beyond the windows. She was impeccably prepared. Revised proposal documents, marketing plans, editorial schedules, everything organized neatly in her portfolio. She noticed Blake the moment he entered, his confident stride cutting through the crowd like the bow of a ship slicing the water. Despite her resolve to stay professional, her body betrayed her the moment she saw him in linen trousers and a pale blue shirt that emphasized shoulders she now knew far too well. Their eyes met across the restaurant, and for a heartbeat, everything else disappeared. Then, the mask of corporate composure returned to his face, and he approached with a neutral smile, revealing nothing of the night they had shared. "Mitchell," he greeted her formally. "Has the author arrived yet?" she asked, glancing at the empty chair. "Not yet," she replied, gesturing toward the spot opposite her. "Seems Wesley's running a bit late." They sat, and an awkward silence fell, both avoiding direct eye contact. Bianca busied herself with her papers, while Blake checked his phone, the tension between them thick enough to cut with a knife. "This is ridiculous," Blake finally muttered, barely above a whisper. "We're acting like teenagers." Bianca lifted her eyes, meeting his gaze directly, for the first time, really seeing each other. "And the alternative?" she asked. "Pretend last night never happened?" "No," he answered quickly, with certainty. "I don't want to pretend." Before she could respond, Wesley Grant arrived, looking far more disheveled than at their previous meeting. His usually light-hearted demeanor was strained. "Sorry I'm late," he said, taking the third seat. "Family issues. My daughter's gallery had a little incident with a reviewer." "Everything okay?" Bianca asked, genuine concern breaking through her professional guard. Wesley waved it off. "Nothing that can't be fixed, but the important thing, I've made a decision." He looked from her to Blake, his face serious. "I've decided not to sign the contract with either of your publishing houses." His words landed like a grenade on the table. Bianca felt her carefully laid plans crumble. Next to her, Blake grew unexpectedly silent. "Wesley," he began, voice even and controlled, "if there's an issue with our proposal—" "It's not about the proposals," Wesley interrupted. "Both were generous, exceptional even." He sighed, running a hand through his gray-streaked hair. "The truth is, I'm not writing another book, at least not the one you're both vying for." Bianca blinked. "But the manuscript," she began. "Put on hold," Wesley finished. "My daughter's health issues have made me reprioritize. I'm taking a break from writing to focus on family." The words struck like a knife to the chest. The disappointment was crushing, not just professionally, but personally. Wesley's work meant more to her than he could know. It had shaped her, opened her eyes to new perspectives. "I understand," she said quietly. "Family comes first." Wesley studied her face, a softening in his expression. "You truly care about the work itself, don't you?" he asked. Bianca nodded, her voice caught in her throat. "That's rare in our business." He turned to Blake. "And the way you listen, not just sell. You surprised me, young Harrington." Blake acknowledged the backhanded compliment with a slight nod. "Your work deserves respect." Wesley looked at them both, more intently now. "Something changed between you two since yesterday." Bianca felt her cheeks heat. Blake remained unreadable, but she noticed his hand tighten around his glass of water. "Professional respect," Blake suggested evenly. "We've learned to appreciate each other's approach." The double meaning didn't escape Bianca, and she shot him a warning glance. Wesley's smile widened, knowing he'd caught it. "Well, I apologize for wasting your time and the company's money by sending you both to Maui," he said, rising, signaling the end of the meeting. "Though, maybe the trip wasn't a total loss." After Wesley left, Bianca and Blake sat in stunned silence, the rejection hanging between them like a dense fog. "Well," Blake finally said, breaking the quiet, "that was unexpected." "A total disaster," Bianca admitted, gathering the now useless documents. "My boss is going to kill me." "At least you don't have to explain how you lost to Harrington Publishing," Blake pointed out. Despite everything, Bianca couldn't help but laugh. "Small consolation," she said. Blake's expression darkened, more serious now. What happens next? We're both flying home tomorrow and we have nothing to show for this trip, she replied. Her gaze met his, and in that look there was more than just a question about the plan. Bianca searched his eyes for the slightest hint of what he really meant. Nothing at all? She asked cautiously. We gained valuable experience? Blake's eyes darkened at her choice of words. Is that what you call it? What would you call it? She countered, refusing to answer directly. But Blake didn't respond. He simply reached across the table and placed his hand over hers. The ordinary contact sent a strange, electric jolt up her arm. Will you have dinner with me tonight? His voice was quiet, yet firm. No business, no competing agendas, just us. The offer was tempting, dangerously tempting. That would be a mistake, she said, though her heart was racing. Probably, he agreed, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. But somehow I don't think I care much. Before she could respond, her phone rang, the boss's ringtone, and reality crashed back in. I need to take this, she said, reluctantly removing her hand. Blake nodded, rising from the table. Think about the dinner. I'll be waiting, either way. As he walked away, Bianca felt her heart torn between professional duty and an unexplainable pull toward the man she was supposed to avoid at all costs. Her phone kept ringing, demanding attention, but her eyes stayed fixed on Blake until he disappeared from view. Whatever happened tonight, it would determine far more than just how she spent her final evening in paradise. It would decide, if anything, what, if anything, came after Maui. Complete disaster, Gerald Porter, CEO of Pinnacle Publishing, shouted over the phone, his voice cracking with frustration. Do you understand what this means for our quarter?
Definitely.
Bianca paced her balcony, watching waves crash against the shore, her career feeling like it was crashing in the same way. Sir, Grant's decision had nothing to do with our offer. This was personal, she tried to explain. I don't care if God himself told him to stop writing, Gerald snapped. We invested significant resources in this acquisition. The board was counting on it. The unspoken message was clear. I was counting on you. Yes, sir, Bianca said, hiding the storm inside behind a mask of professionalism. I'll prepare a full report upon my return. Don't worry about it. Miranda will handle the board. Just focus on Stephen's manuscript when you get back. Miranda, the senior editor who had her own designs on Wesley's book. Bianca closed her eyes, realizing her reassignment was really a demotion in disguise. Yes, sir. After ending the call, Bianca stood still, letting the tropical breeze cool her face, burning with humiliation. One failed deal shouldn't define her career, but in the unforgiving world of publishing, perhaps it would. Stevens's manuscript was a commercial thriller, solid but uninspired, nothing compared to Wesley's philosophical masterpiece. Her phone pinged, a message, dinner at 8 Cal. I know a place, away from the resort, B. Blake. Here it was, another complication she couldn't refuse. Professionally, she should have declined the invitation, focused on rebuilding her career. But something deeper, something beyond physical attraction, tied to the vulnerability she had glimpsed in his unguarded moments, made her respond. Yes. Where? Her reply came almost instantly. I'll pick you up. Wear something simple. At 8 o'clock, Bianca stepped into the resort lobby, wearing a light dress, her hair falling freely over her shoulders. Blake was waiting at the entrance, transformed from corporate heir into an unassuming island guest in worn jeans and a white t-shirt that somehow looked more expensive than most formal suits. You came, he said, relief threading his voice. I'm surprised I did, she admitted. His smile was genuine, without the practiced charisma he wielded in boardrooms. Ready for an adventure? What do you mean by adventure? Trust me. He held out his hand, but the question wasn't only about plans for the evening. After a brief hesitation, Bianca placed her hand in his. Against all reason. Outside, instead of the expected luxury car, a vintage Jeep Wrangler waited. Blake helped her in, then slid behind the wheel himself. Not your usual style, she remarked as they drove beyond the manicured resort grounds. Maybe you'll be surprised by what my style really is. Blake maneuvered the Jeep confidently along the coastal road, as though he had known this path all his life. How did your call with your boss go? Bianca asked, wincing. Career first. Sorry, he said, genuinely regretful. Harrington Publishing isn't thrilled with me either. My father even called personally to express his displeasure. The great Blake Harrington gets scolded too, she teased. Shocking, right? More often than you think. He glanced at her, the setting sun illuminating his profile. Being the heir means the bar is set impossibly high. Mistakes aren't forgiven. The vulnerability in his voice sent an unexpected jolt through Bianca's chest. And what will happen now? She asked softly. After such a setback? I'll have to prove my worth all over again. He shrugged, but Bianca noticed the tension hidden beneath the gesture. And you? The duty of commercial literature, she said, smiling. The literary equivalent of working a mine. Blake's hand found hers on the console, a simple gesture of solidarity that felt unexpectedly comforting. Their loss, he said confidently. You understand writing in ways most editors don't even try. The compliment melted her more than it should have. How do you know that? I read your notes on Wesley's manuscript, he said with a smirk. The pages were still on the bed that first night I came over. You never mentioned that before. Professional advantage, he winked. Though even then, I should have known keeping things strictly professional between us would be impossible. Before Bianca could reply, Blake turned off the main road onto a dirt track cutting through thick tropical vegetation. Minutes later, the trees parted, revealing a small, weathered restaurant perched on a cliff overlooking a hidden cove. String lights twinkled around an old wooden walkway, and mismatched tables were filled with locals, not tourists. What is this place? Bianca asked as Blake parked alongside a few other well-used vehicles. The best place on the island, according to real Hawaiians, he said, stepping out to open her door. No resort concierge would ever recommend it. And how did you find it? A flicker crossed Blake's face. Doubt, maybe even embarrassment. I washed dishes here during summer college breaks. Bianca stared at him. You worked as a dishwasher, heir to Harrington Publishing? My grandfather believed in earning your way, Blake said, extending a hand to help her out of the Jeep. I would never have understood the value of an empire if I hadn't known real work. The revelation shifted something in Bianca's perception. He wasn't just a privileged heir. He understood effort, responsibility, and the weight of claiming one's place in life. Inside, the restaurant buzzed with warmth and laughter. A small woman with silvery hair spotted Blake and hurried toward him, enveloping him in a firm hug. Blake Harrington? 3 years, and now you show up without warning. Sorry, Aunt Leilani, Blake said, returning the hug with genuine affection. Last-minute trip. Leilani's eyes flicked to Bianca, scrutinizing her with careful curiosity. And who's this? Not another lawyer? Actually, Blake replied, Bianca, this is Leilani Kahali. She owns this place, and once threatened me with a wooden spoon for using too many dishes. You deserved it, Leilani said, eyes twinkling with amusement. Come on, I'll show you to your table. She led them to a corner overlooking the ocean where a small table for two awaited, candles flickering and fresh flowers arranged just so. Leaning close to Bianca, Leilani whispered, loud enough for her to hear. He was a terrible dishwasher, but a good boy. Heart in the right place. After Leilani moved away, Bianca raised an eyebrow at Blake. Heart in the right place? Doesn't quite match the ruthless businessman reputation. For a moment, Blake seemed caught off guard. Reputations are often manufactured. They're useful in business. So, who's the real Blake Harrington? Corporate shark or good boy with a heart in the right place? The question hung between them, eyes locked over the candlelight. For the first time since she'd met him, Blake seemed unsure. Not even sure anymore, he finally admitted, and the honesty in his voice surprised her. Sometimes I think I've played a role for so long that I've forgotten the original script. Before Bianca could respond, Leilani returned with 2 vivid cocktails. No menu tonight. I'm cooking for you, she declared. Course after course, local delicacies appeared. Fresh fish, tropical fruits, dishes whose names Bianca didn't recognize but whose flavors were unforgettable. Wine flowed, and conversation drifted far from publishing wars, Wesley Grant, or rival companies. Blake shared stories of summer holidays in Hawaii, of his grandfather's harsh love that prepared him for the family empire. Bianca shared memories of her childhood in a small Pennsylvania town, her mother's work at the library that inspired her love of books, and her struggle to carve her place in New York's competitive literary world. Why an editor? Blake asked over a dessert of passion fruit mousse. If you love books so much, why not write them? Bianca considered, surprised by how easily truth flowed from her lips. I tried for a long time, but my words never quite captured what I felt. She traced the edge of her wine glass. Then I realized I could help others find their words. There's something beautiful about that, Blake said, studying her by candlelight, being a bridge between a writer's vision and a reader's understanding. You truly love it, he said, not for business, not for prestige, but for the work itself. Isn't that what it's about? It should be. A shadow flickered across his expression. At Harrington Publishing, it was easy to forget amidst acquisitions and profit margins. So, that's why you wanted Wesley's book? For the numbers? Blake hesitated. At first, yes. It would have been a prestigious acquisition. He met her gaze. But then I read the manuscript, really read it, and I understood why you fought so hard for it. His words, they matter, created a tension between them that went beyond simple attraction, evolving into something deeper, a recognition of shared values hidden beneath their professional masks. After dinner, they strolled along the small beach beneath the restaurant. The night was perfect. Stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. The waves whispered softly, a natural symphony for the moment. Thank you for tonight, Bianca said, stopping and turning to him, for showing me this place, the real Hawaii. Thank you for coming, Blake replied, tucking a strand of her hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering briefly on her skin. Even though you had every reason not to trust me. I still don't know if I should, she admitted. Probably shouldn't, he agreed, taking a step closer. But I hope you will. When he kissed her, it was different this time. Less rushed, more questioning. His hands cradled her face with such tenderness that her heart tightened, as if she were something precious rather than a fleeting passion. When they pulled apart, Bianca felt a truth she had been avoiding. Blake, what are we even doing? Tomorrow we return to New York, to companies that, she hesitated, that are direct competitors in careers that just survived major blows because of Wesley's decision. But instead of the smooth answer she expected, Blake ran a hand through his hair, his expression one of genuine frustration. I don't know. The thought of saying goodbye tomorrow feels... He faltered, searching for the right word. Wrong. The rare uncertainty from this usually confident man touched Bianca deeply. This can't work. You understand that, right? Why? He asked, meeting her gaze. Because our companies compete? Because we met under unusual circumstances? Because relationships that start like this, with intense attraction, limited time, and exotic location, don't survive in the real world? That's statistically likely, Blake admitted, surprising her again. But statistics don't account for exceptions. He took her hands in his. I'm not saying we have all the answers. I'm saying don't close the book until you've read at least the first chapter. The publishing metaphor didn't escape her. And what exactly are you suggesting? Dinner in New York next week. No hotel rooms, no competing manuscripts, just two people seeing if there's more here than Maui's magic. The suggestion was reasonable, measured, even. Nothing like the whirlwind of the last 2 days. But Bianca slowed, her practical editor's mind weighing every way this could complicate her already fragile professional situation. I need to think, she finally said. Blake nodded. Disappointment was evident but controlled. Fair enough. The drive back to the resort was quiet, comfortable, despite the unresolved question between them. When they reached the hotel, Blake escorted her to their shared room, the same room where their passion had been brief but intense. He stopped at the door. I should tell you, I booked a separate room for you tonight. I thought, regardless of what you decide about New York, you deserve space to think without added complications. His thoughtfulness surprised her. That's very considerate of you. Don't be so surprised, he said with a small smile. I can sometimes think about another person's needs. Bianca studied his face carefully, seeing a hidden complexity behind the handsome features. Where will you be staying? 2 floors down, room 7 on 12. He didn't finish the sentence, but Bianca understood. Standing in the doorway of what had been their shared room, she felt the weight of the decision. The practical choice was clear. Thank you for your attention. Good night. And though this night should have been about preparing for the professional challenges awaiting her in New York, she found herself instead reaching for his hand. Stay, she whispered, and the simple word hung between them, loaded with meaning that went far beyond tonight, beyond this room, beyond this fleeting tropical adventure. Blake's fingers intertwined with hers, his expression suddenly serious. Are you sure about tonight? Yes. Bianca stepped closer, her free hand brushing against his chest, feeling his heartbeat accelerate beneath her palm. And about everything else? Ask me again in New York. His smile was slow, genuine, and his eyes sparkled in a way that took her breath away. I will, she promised. When the door closed behind them, Bianca knew they were writing a chapter that defied all rules of the story, whether it would become something lasting or remain away. Beautiful, fleeting moment only time would tell. But tonight, in this room, carried by chance, they allowed themselves to believe in possibilities beyond the last page. Morning arrived with unwelcome clarity. Sunlight streamed through windows they had once again forgotten to close. But this time, Bianca didn't slip away. She remained in the circle of Blake's arms, watching the light play across his sleeping face, memorizing the vulnerability that would vanish the moment he awoke. As if sensing her gaze, Blake's eyes fluttered open, immediately finding her face. You're still here, he murmured, his voice husky from sleep. This is my room too, she reminded him with a soft smile. His hand rose to trace the line of her cheek. I meant you didn't run off this morning. I won't run today, Bianca agreed, though her practical mind was already ticking through the day's tasks, packing, airport, returning to reality. Blake seemed to read her thoughts. When's your flight? 2. And yours? 4. He kissed her forehead. Different airlines, different terminals. The physical separation felt symbolic, marking the end of their Maui bubble and the start of what might, or might not, happen in New York. They went through the morning routine with unusual ease, like a couple long accustomed to each other, sharing the bathroom, packing their things, ordering coffee when the resort restaurant was too crowded. Only when Bianca's car arrived to take her to the airport did the playful ease of their farewell shift into the weight of impending separation. Standing in the hotel lot, suitcase at her feet, Bianca felt a sudden awkwardness. So, what now? Blake asked, his usual confidence softened. About New York, she said, taking a deep breath. As for that, I think I'd like to try that dinner. The smile that lit up Blake's face made the risk she'd taken feel completely worth it. Wednesday, 8 o'clock. I know a place no concierge has on any list, something off the beaten path, like a secret little spot. He stepped closer, his hand resting on her waist. Can I call you before Wednesday? The question felt unexpectedly sweet, coming from a man who could probably buy the airline they were both flying home on. Yes, but Blake, she hesitated. For now, this has to stay between us. My position at Pinnacle is already precarious after losing Wesley. Something flickered in his eyes. Perhaps disappointment, but also understanding. Difficult, but manageable, he said. Despite the uncertainty ahead, she smiled. Blake's kiss was gentle, restrained in public, but promising more. Have a good flight, Bianca Mitchell. And you, Blake Harrington. When her car pulled away, Bianca kept watching Blake in the rearview mirror until he disappeared from sight. The editor in her recognized it as the end of one chapter and the beginning of another, its plot still forming. The woman in her, the one who had awakened in his arms and fallen asleep to the rhythm of his heartbeat, knew the story had changed forever. Whatever happened in New York, she was no longer the same Bianca who had arrived at this Maui resort 3 days ago. Some stories refused to follow the expected script. October in New York was nothing like the paradise of Maui. Cold rain hammered against the windows of Pinnacle Publishing's Midtown office as Bianca struggled to focus on a manuscript that could define her professional future. Stevens's thriller needs serious revisions, Miranda explained, clearly enjoying the power shift. The author's difficult, thinks he's the next James Patterson. I'll take it, Bianca replied, steadying the tremor in her stomach. This assignment felt like punishment, nothing else. 3 days had passed since her return from Hawaii. 3 days of damage control meetings, budget revisions, and sharp hints about the Wesley Grant project. 3 days waiting for her phone to buzz with Blake's name, an event that happened every evening. Their conversations had stretched for hours, revealing new facets of a man she had once only seen as a corporate player. Last night, he had made her laugh until tears ran, recounting stories of his first disastrous publisher conference. Tonight, Wednesday, was the dinner they had promised each other. "Earth calling, Bianca," Miranda snapped, pulling her from her thoughts. "Marketing meeting at 3. "I'll be there," Bianca nodded, forcing herself back into reality. Once Miranda left, Bianca couldn't resist checking her phone. A message from Blake. "Still in? 8 p.m. Wear something warm. I'll send a car." Her fingers hovered over the screen. Professional caution screamed to cancel. Stephen's manuscript demanded attention. Her position at Pinnacle was delicate. But she typed back, "Yes, can't wait. Practicality be damned." At exactly 8 a sleek black car arrived outside her Brooklyn apartment. The driver didn't take her to a restaurant. Instead, he brought her to an unassuming building in the West Village. "Mr. Harrington is waiting upstairs," the driver said, handing her a key. "5th floor." Intrigued and slightly nervous, Bianca climbed the stairs. The building wasn't luxurious, but it was well kept. The key turned in the lock of apartment 5B, and she froze. Books everywhere. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined the walls, interrupted only by tall windows and a fireplace crackling with tiny flames. Cozy leather chairs, reading lamps, and small tables created intimate corners throughout the open space. The scent of old paper mingled with a tantalizing aroma of food. "Blake?" she called as she stepped inside. He appeared from what she assumed was the kitchen, in jeans and a simple sweater that somehow made him more alluring than any tailored suit. Seeing him here, in this unexpected sanctuary, her heart raced, unrelated to climbing 5 flights of stairs. "You came," he said, echoing the words from their Maui dinner. "This isn't a restaurant," Bianca said, still taking in the literary haven around her. "No," Blake replied, moving closer than necessary. "This is my place. My real place." "I don't understand," she whispered, trying to grasp his meaning. "The Park Avenue penthouse, Blake Harrington, future CEO of Harrington Publishing." He gestured around the room, filled with books. "This belongs only to Blake." The distinction hit her with weight she hadn't anticipated. "How many people know about this place, besides you?" she asked. 3. Me, my grandfather before he passed, and Mrs. Kowalski, who manages the building. The intimacy of being admitted into this secret sanctuary didn't escape Bianca. She approached the nearest bookshelf, running her fingers along the spines. First editions, carefully worn paperbacks, classics, and contemporary works, all mixed yet organized in a system she couldn't immediately decipher. "You actually read these?" she asked, noticing the cracked spines and occasional margin notes. "This isn't a collection just for show." "Books aren't trophies," Blake replied, approaching her. "They're living things." Something shifted in Bianca's chest at the resonance of that sentiment. This wasn't the corporate shark she'd met that first day, nor the passionate man she'd shared a bed with in Maui. This was someone deeper, more complex. "You're not what I expected," she admitted. "Good," he answered, his smile genuine, eyes lighting up in a way his corporate persona rarely allowed. "Hungry? I made dinner." "You cook too?" she teased. "Any other hidden talents I should know about?" Blake's eyes darkened as he recalled their night together. "A few, but let's start with dinner first." The meal was simple, yet delicious. Seafood pasta, crusty bread, and fine wine, served on a small table by the window overlooking the neighboring block. Unlike the resort restaurants, here it felt personal, intimate, something that transcended mere physical attraction. "Why publishing?" Bianca asked, sipping her second glass of wine. "If this is the real you, why hide behind the corporate image? Why not be this person at Harrington?" Blake considered, swirling his wineglass. "Family legacy, responsibility, the practical reality that publishing is still a business." He met her gaze. "And also the fact that Blake, the man who loves books, doesn't intimidate competitors or impress shareholders." "They're missing out," Bianca whispered. "This version is far more interesting." Blake smiled, vulnerability threading through it. "I'm starting to think so too." Later, seated before the fireplace with dessert and coffee, their conversation flowed as easily as it had that night in Maui. Bianca shared her struggles at Pinnacle, the instability of her position, the fear that her career trajectory had been forever altered by Wesley Grant's decisions. "What if you didn't have to worry about Pinnacle?" Blake asked suddenly. Bianca's defenses snapped up instantly. "What do you mean?" "There's an opening," he said. "Junior acquisitions editor in the literary department. The salary is significantly higher than at Pinnacle." Bianca set her coffee cup down harder than she intended. "You're offering me a job?" Blake looked genuinely puzzled by her reaction. "It's a good opportunity. More creative freedom, better resources." This dinner? This?" She gestured between them. "Whatever we've been doing, is this some kind of recruitment strategy?" "Of course not." Blake's expression shifted from confusion to concern. "Bianca, no. This vacancy opened yesterday. I thought of you because you're talented, not because, I don't know, if I slept with you, it would be easier to lure you away from a competitor." The words came out sharper than she expected, fueled by professional insecurity and a sudden fear that she had misread everything. Blake's expression turned colder. His corporate mask returned for a brief moment. "If this were a strategy, I would have mentioned the opening back in Maui, not after 3 days of conversations about everything except business." Her defenses faltered under his logic. "Sorry, that was unfair," she admitted. "Yes, it was," Blake said, running a hand through his hair, restraining irritation. "I'm trying to figure this out too, Bianca, this line between personal and professional. I thought I was offering something good." "You made the offer, She struggled to articulate the swirling emotions inside her. "My career is already hanging by a thread. If I switch to Harrington now, it'll look like I failed at Pinnacle and you're rescuing me. Or worse, like I used our connection to get the position." Understanding lit up Blake's eyes. "I didn't think of that." "Of course you didn't. You're Blake Harrington. Your name's on the building. You've never worried about perceptions of favoritism." His expression softened, and he stayed quiet for a long moment, the firelight flickering across his face as he considered her words. "You're right," he finally admitted. "I'm sorry." The simple acknowledgement seemed to lift the last traces of her irritation. "I appreciate you saying that. Honestly, just bad timing." Blake nodded, accepting her explanation without argument. "To be honest," he continued, "I didn't invite you here to talk business. I invited you because I haven't stopped thinking about you since Maui." Her remaining irritation melted at his honesty. "I haven't stopped thinking about you either. So, what now?" It was the question she'd avoided since they returned. "It's complicated," Bianca admitted. "My career matters to me, and my reputation too." "Both are important," Blake said, gently taking her hand and stroking her palm. "But what if we just keep this private for now? Give ourselves time to understand what's happening between us before worrying about what anyone else thinks?" A secret arrangement. The idea should have offended her professional principles, but Bianca found herself seriously considering it. "That might be necessary," Blake continued. "For now, not forever." The distinction mattered. This wasn't about shame or convenience, but pragmatism. Time to figure out what they had without external pressures or professional complications. "All right," she agreed quietly. "For now." Blake's smile made the compromise feel worth it. For now. Later, when he kissed her goodbye at her door, insisting on walking her home despite the late hour, the spark that had ignited in Maui flared again. His hand brushed her hair, and she instinctively leaned closer. Their connection was undeniable, despite all the complications around them. "Stay," she whispered into his ear, repeating the words from their last night in Hawaii. Blake's gaze, as he pulled back to look at her face, held a silent question. "Are you sure?" Bianca took his hand and led him inside, wordlessly answering. The weeks that followed set a rhythm neither had expected, yet both embraced wholeheartedly. Dinners at his quiet West Village apartment, morning hours in her sunny Brooklyn flat, museums, bookstores, and hidden cafes where they were unlikely to encounter publishing colleagues. Amid these stolen moments, they kept up their professional lives. Bianca immersed herself in Stevens's manuscript, turning an ordinary thriller into something that genuinely impressed even the author. Blake navigated the corporate machinery of Harrington Publishing, quietly implementing changes that reflected the values behind his polished business exterior. They were cautious. Professional events attended separately. No public displays, no digital traces of their relationship for the publishing world. They remained competitors who had once fought over the same manuscript. But in private, something far deeper was unfolding. "You reorganized my bookshelves," Blake accused her one Saturday morning, spotting her sitting on the floor surrounded by stacks of books. "Your system was chaos. Hemingway next to Rowling. Sacrilege." "There was a system," he protested, sitting down beside her. "Emotional resonance, not alphabetical or chronological order." Bianca looked at him with genuine surprise. "You organize books by how they make you feel? Isn't that the worst way to remember a story?" The revelation that this practical, methodical businessman cataloged literature by emotional impact touched her literary soul. She set the books aside and kissed him, and what started as a spark quickly became a passionate continuation, their bodies entwined among scattered novels, adding new memories to Blake's unconventional system. But not every moment was idyllic. Reality intruded, both predictably and unexpectedly. "Harrington Publishing just acquired Westridge Books," Miranda announced at an especially tense editorial meeting 3 weeks into Bianca and Blake's secret affair. "They're systematically eliminating mid-sized competitors." Bianca remained calm, masking her shock. Blake hadn't mentioned any acquisition, let alone one directly affecting Pinnacle's market position. That evening, in his book-filled apartment, she couldn't remain silent. "You were going to tell me about Westridge?" Blake looked genuinely surprised. "The deal only closed this morning. The announcement was scheduled for next week." "That's not an answer," she said, her irritation evident. Blake sighed, setting down his wine glass. "Yes, I was going to tell you, but not because it affects Pinnacle, because it affects me." "The board doubts my focus lately," he admitted. "Because of us?" Her voice held a flicker of concern. "No," he hurried to reassure her, "because I'm defending editorial independence over marketing priorities. Westridge was my father's project, not mine." The distinction mattered, but the incident highlighted the precariousness of their positions, lovers in private, business competitors in public. Then came the Stevens manuscript crisis. "The author is threatening to walk," Gerald announced, dropping a thick folder onto her desk. "Says your edits are destroying his voice." Bianca had spent weeks perfecting the thriller, transforming wooden dialogue and predictable plot turns into something truly gripping. His voice was exactly what needed fixing. It was terrible. Gerald's expression remained grim. "Fix it, Mitchell. We can't afford another failure." The unspoken threat hung in the air. Her career and her credibility depended on keeping Stevens. That night, Bianca canceled dinner with Blake and stayed late, crafting a diplomatic response to the author's complaints. When her phone rang just before midnight, Blake's concern was audible. "You okay? You haven't called back." "Author crisis," she explained, exhaustion creeping into her voice. "Stevens is threatening to leave Pinnacle." "Because of your edits?" "Because his ego can't handle criticism. My edits would at least make his book readable." Blake paused briefly. "What if I told you Harrington rejected his previous manuscript 3 times? Bianca sat up straight. "What?" "He tried for a long time to sell that work. Our acquisitions team has a file on him, stubborn, resistant to edits, convinced he's underappreciated." This was exactly what she needed, a lever to convince Gerald that Stevens wasn't worth the concessions he demanded. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked, realizing the professional advantage he'd just handed her. "Competitive intelligence," he replied. "Because it matters to you," he said simply, "and you matter to me." That confession, without expectations or hidden agendas, shifted something fundamental between them. It wasn't just attraction or compatibility. It was deeper. It was a choice to place her well-being above corporate gain. The next day, armed with the information Blake had given her, presented as industry gossip, not insider intel, Bianca convinced Gerald to take a firmer stance with Stevens. Confronted by a unified editorial position, the author eventually agreed to the necessary changes. That evening, after her victory, she arrived at Blake's apartment. He was seated at the dining table, pages of a manuscript spread around him. Working late? She asked, kissing him lightly. Hey, new manuscript from an emerging author, something special. He lifted her onto his lap, pressing his neck against hers. How did it go with Stevens? He agreed. Your tips helped. Blake's smile was genuine. Bianca studied his face in the soft lamplight, realizing how much had changed since their tense first encounter in Maui. The corporate mask had softened, revealing the person beneath. He remained ambitious, driven, but now with motives beyond profit. Blake, Bianca said cautiously, what are we doing? He understood her question went beyond evening plans. Falling in love, I think, he said with his characteristic bluntness, yet his eyes revealed vulnerability beneath the confidence. At least I am. The admission should have scared her, too fast, too complicated, with so many professional landmines around them. But instead of fear, Bianca felt something entirely different, recognition, as if he had simply voiced what she had already known but couldn't articulate. I am too, she whispered, pressing into him slightly. And it scares me. Because of work. Because of everything. My career, your position, the fact that we've known each other only 2 months. Blake carefully tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture that had become familiar and treasured. Some stories don't follow the usual timeline, said the publisher, a man who lived by production schedules. His laughter was warm against her skin. The best books are worth changing the calendar for, the metaphor was clear to her. And that's us. A bestseller just about to be released. I'd bet the company on it, Blake said, his tone leaving no room for exaggeration. Then something in his voice made her tense. What? Tomorrow's board meeting. My father is stepping down as CEO earlier than expected. Bianca's eyes widened. Blake, that's huge. Are you ready? That's the question, he said, his confidence momentarily faltering. As CEO, visibility will change. Every move scrutinized. Our situation just got a lot more complicated. He meant it clearly. As an heir, Blake had certain freedoms. As CEO, his personal life would attract shareholder interest, industry gossip, and public attention. What are you saying? Bianca asked, a knot forming in her stomach. I'm saying I don't want to hide anymore. His hands framed her face, expression serious. I'm saying I love you and want to figure out how to make it real, open, honest, without compromising what matters to both of us. The confession, both of love and of openness, left Bianca momentarily speechless. The timing is terrible, Blake continued. I know your position at Pinnacle is still fragile. Stevens's manuscript isn't even in production yet, but I need you to know where I stand before everything changes tomorrow. Bianca understood the weight of his words, the value of his candor, before corporate obligations could limit his choices. What does this mean for us, practically speaking? She asked. That's what we figure out, together, he proposed. The offer was thrilling in its simplicity and daunting in its complexity. There were no easy solutions, no guaranteed path forward. Only the commitment to face challenges as a whole, not as separate pieces. I need to think, Bianca finally said. This will affect my career too. Blake nodded, accepting her hesitation without offense. Take all the time you need. That night, as they lay together, the question of their future hung between them. Bianca realized just how far they had come since that first tense evening in Maui. What had begun as a forced proximity had blossomed into chosen intimacy. Physical, yes, but also emotional, intellectual, and even spiritual. Whatever decisions awaited them, one truth had become inevitable. Some stories refused to follow the expected plot, and sometimes the most complicated narratives deliver the most satisfying endings. Morning would bring new challenges, new choices. But for this night, in the sanctuary of his world, they allowed themselves simply to exist in the present. Two people who had found each other against all odds, writing a story neither had anticipated, but both now cherished. Tomorrow demanded decisions. Tonight required only acknowledgement of what had already taken root between them, flourishing despite the rocky soil of professional rivalry. Love, it seemed, had its own editorial process, cutting everything that didn't serve the story, emphasizing what mattered, and sometimes introducing plot twists that defied conventional structures. As Bianca drifted to sleep in Blake's arms, she wondered what the final chapter of their story might hold, and whether they would be ready to write it together. The headline on the cover of Publishers Weekly read like a coronation: Blake Harrington, appointed CEO of Harrington Publishing. The article detailed his Harvard MBA, his successful acquisitions, and his vision for the company's digital future. What it did not reveal, and Bianca could not have known, was that the new CEO had spent the night before his appointment sleepless, holding the woman he loved, both contemplating what his promotion might mean for their carefully constructed relationship. Bianca stared at the article on her tablet. A strange mixture of pride and anxiety churned in her stomach. The accompanying photo showed Blake in full corporate armor, tailored suit, confident smile, the perfect heir taking his rightful place. Her phone vibrated with a message from Blake. Survived the first board meeting, dinner tonight. A simple text concealing the complexity of their situation. She replied, "Congratulations, CEO. Yes, dinner, at Pinnacle." News of Blake's appointment spread through the office like a minor earthquake. The publishing world was small, and leadership changes at major houses affected everyone. Now Harrington will be even more aggressive, Gerald predicted at the morning editorial meeting. New blood always wants to make waves. We need to fortify, protect our key authors. Miranda nodded knowingly. I've heard he's ruthless, entirely profit-driven. Bianca pressed her lips together, resisting the gap between perception and reality. The ruthless new CEO had spent last Sunday reading her poetry aloud in her tiny Brooklyn apartment, debating lines and metaphors with her passionately. Mitchell, Gerald's voice cut through her thoughts. Stevens's manuscript, where are we? Final edits are complete, she reported, concealing her inner unease with professional poise. All changes approved. Production can start next week. Good, Gerald replied, his approval as rare as it was brief. At least something is on track. His sarcastic compliment stung, but Bianca accepted it with practiced grace. In the 6 weeks since returning from Maui, she had worked tirelessly to restore her professional reputation and prove her worth, despite the setback with Wesley Grant. But now Blake's promotion threatened to complicate everything they had built. Blake's West Village apartment welcomed her again with its familiar warmth. Books, the flicker of the fireplace, the aroma of something delicious simmering in the kitchen. Yet the man who opened the door looked tired, the weight of his new role evident in the tension around his eyes. Congratulations, Bianca said, standing on tiptoe to kiss him. How does it feel? Unreal, Blake replied, leading her inside. On the table sat a bottle of champagne on ice. Terrifying, exhilarating. As he poured, Bianca noticed subtle changes. A stack of corporate reports on the coffee table, a second phone, clearly for business, charging on the kitchen counter, and a bag for tomorrow's CEO wardrobe hanging nearby. To new beginnings, Blake proposed, raising his glass. To new beginnings, she echoed, and the toast carried far more weight than the moment required. Over dinner, Blake shared the details of his first day. Board expectations, his father's unexpectedly emotional handover speech, and the first hurdles he would face. Bianca listened, offering advice where she could and support where she couldn't. Only when they moved to the couch, the remnants of dinner forgotten, did Blake touch the subject they had skirted for so long. We need to talk about us, he said, taking her hand. About making our relationship public. Bianca's chest tightened. Blake, I understand this is complicated. I know your position at Pinnacle is still stabilizing, but hiding us, it feels wrong now. It's not about hiding, she replied softly. It's about professional boundaries. You're now the CEO of a major publishing house. I'm an editor at a direct competitor. People often find each other despite company boundaries, Blake said, but she cut him off. Not often when one person can buy the other company without blinking. Blake's expression darkened, a clear sign of frustration. So, do we hide forever? Pretend we don't know each other at industry events? That's impossible, Bianca. I know, she said, squeezing his hand, acknowledging the impossibility of their situation. But going public has consequences for both of us, especially for me. Explain, Blake said, his directness leaving no room for evasion. I'm rebuilding my reputation at Pinnacle based on my work, my editorial choices, Bianca said cautiously. If people know I'm with you, everything I've earned will be questioned. Did I get here on my talent, or because Blake Harrington's girlfriend needed a win? Because no one wants to cross the CEO of Harrington Publishing? Understanding dawned in Blake's eyes. Your professional independence. Exactly. And from your side, how will your company react if you're dating someone from a competitor? Will authors worry about conflicts of interest? Will your acquisitions team feel they can't speak freely about Pinnacle projects if you're in the room? Blake was silent for a long moment, processing her words with the same careful attention he gave manuscripts on his desk. All fair points, he finally admitted. But they're solvable if we approach this right, if we choose the right timing. That's what we need to figure out. He leaned closer, his hand lifting to caress her cheek. I know one thing. I love you. I know one thing. You are the most talented editor I've ever met. I know one thing. These two truths can coexist without diminishing either. The confidence in his voice nearly broke her. I love you too, Bianca whispered, but love doesn't solve professional ethics. No, Blake agreed, but it gives us a reason to seek solutions, not obstacles. They discussed every possible angle late into the night, disclosure protocols, professional boundaries, potential career shifts. Bianca was amazed at how effortlessly they switched from lovers to strategic partners and back again. In Blake, she had found not only passion, but an intellectual equal, someone who understood both her heart and her ambitions. Whatever path they chose, it wouldn't be easy. Yet lying in his arms past midnight, Bianca realized she had already made her decision. Some relationships are worth reshaping your life for. Some people are worth the risk. 2 weeks later, the time came for the annual Publishing Industry Gala. Bianca found herself among the attendees, held at the New York Public Library. This was the night when publishing houses temporarily set aside their rivalries to celebrate the art of literature, though competition never truly disappeared. Bianca arrived alone, wearing a midnight blue gown far more expensive than she cared to admit. Blake, of course, was also there, recently appointed CEO, making his first official appearance in his new role. They had agreed to acknowledge each other, but maintain professional distance at the event until their disclosure strategy was finalized. The Grand Library had been transformed for the evening. Marble halls glowed with soft lighting, casting the books lining the walls as if they were alive, radiating from within. Publishing elites mingled with literary stars, agents moved among top executives, editors exchanged opinions on upcoming releases. Bianca navigated the crowd with ease and confidence, offering pleasantries to colleagues and congratulating authors on recent successes. Across the room, she spotted Blake, surrounded by admirers, radiating the commanding presence of a true CEO in his perfectly tailored tuxedo. Their eyes met for a fleeting second, a private acknowledgement amid a public game. Blake's faint smile warmed her from afar, a reminder of the man beneath the corporate mask. Mitchell. Gerald's voice interrupted her thoughts. Meet James Foster. He's considering Pinnacle for his new thriller series. James Foster, a best-selling author whose contract with his current publisher had been the subject of intense industry speculation, stood before her. This was exactly the kind of author who could become key to Bianca's revival at Pinnacle. Charming and thoughtful, his questions about her editorial approach conveyed genuine interest, not mere courtesy. As their conversation deepened, Bianca felt a thrill at the prospect of working with him. Your perspective on character development is exactly what I've been missing, Foster admitted, clearly impressed. My current editor focuses almost exclusively on plot pacing. Balance is key, Bianca suggested. The best thrillers make readers care about who survives, not just whether anyone survives. Foster nodded enthusiastically. Exactly. I'd love to hear more about how you'd approach my new series concept. As they spoke, Bianca sensed a subtle shift in the room's atmosphere. Glances directed their way, whispers floating through the crowd. Gerald, standing nearby, suddenly appeared uneasy. Then she felt a familiar presence next to her, magnetic, undeniable. Mr. Foster, said a familiar voice, Blake Harrington's. I hope I'm not interrupting. Foster glanced at Blake and Bianca, his interest immediately piqued. Not at all, Mr. Harrington. Miss Mitchell and I were just discussing editorial approaches to character development. You're in excellent hands, Blake replied evenly. Miss Mitchell is unmatched when it comes to character motivation. A compliment, delivered with professional courtesy rather than personal admiration, nevertheless sent a ripple of surprise through everyone within earshot. The CEO of Harrington Publishing praising a pinnacle editor? Unheard of. Gerald stepped forward, clearly trying to regain control of the situation. "Blake, good to see you. Congratulations on the promotion." "Thank you, Gerald," Blake replied, his tone polite but neutral. "I was hoping to steal a moment with Miss Mitchell. A few business questions?" Before Gerald could protest, Blake turned to Bianca. "If you have a moment," he asked, and immediately she felt that this invitation carried something more. This wasn't part of their plan. This was Blake acting on his own accord. Of course," she said, hiding her excitement behind professional composure. Blake led her to a quieter corner of the vast room, aware of the curious eyes following them. "What are you doing?" Bianca whispered once they were relatively private. "We agreed to wait," Blake replied softly. "But I saw you speaking with Foster. I saw how you built the opportunity, how you made contact, and then I noticed the moment Gerald realized that you could genuinely interest a major author through your own merits. And then I saw his face change when he started calculating how to claim your achievements as his own." Blake's expression hardened for a brief moment. "I realized we were approaching this the wrong way." "What do you mean?" she asked, not fully understanding. "Hiding our relationship doesn't protect your professional independence. It undermines it. You'll work twice as hard for half the recognition, always worried that someone will find out and use it against you." Bianca froze, processing his words. Blake, making such a bold, risky move tonight, it could backfire. "I'm not suggesting a grand gesture," his voice softened. "Just honesty, transparency on our terms, not someone else's." They stood weighing their options amidst some of the most influential people in the industry when Miranda approached with an editor from Harrington Publishing. "Blake," the editor said, barely hiding his respect, "the Booker Prize Committee has been asking for you." "Thank you, David. I'll find them in a moment," Blake replied politely but firmly. Miranda narrowed her eyes, observing the interaction between Blake and Bianca. "Mitchell, Gerald's looking for you. Something about continuing the conversation with Mr. Foster." The subtext was clear. Get back to work, away from competition. Bianca felt a moment of absolute clarity, the culmination of weeks of reflection where professional caution collided with personal truth. Standing between representatives of both publishing houses, she made her decision. "Actually, Miranda," she said calmly, "Mr. Harrington and I need to discuss something." Miranda's eyebrows shot up. David looked puzzled. Blake's expression remained neutral, though Bianca caught the question in his eyes. "We should?" he asked quietly. "Yes." Bianca turned to face him fully. "I've been considering an opportunity that could resolve several of our professional challenges." A look of understanding crossed Blake's eyes, quickly tempered by restraint. Whatever she was about to say, he let her lead the conversation. "I've been offered a position at Westbridge Literary," Bianca continued, naming one of the most respected agencies in the industry, as a senior agent specializing in literary fiction and high-quality thrillers. The news clearly surprised Blake, though he recovered quickly. "When did this happen?" "The formal offer came yesterday. Eleanor Westbridge reached out last week after learning about my work on the Stevens manuscript." Miranda watched the exchange with growing bewilderment. "Mitchell, what's going on here?" Bianca ignored the question, her full attention on Blake. "An agent works for authors, not publishers. I'm done at Pinnacle. I'm done competing directly with Harrington." Blake absorbed the information, weighing its implications. "And you're considering the offer?" "Yes," Bianca took a deep breath. "But before I make any decision, I needed to discuss it with you, considering our personal relationship." The words hung in the air, her first public acknowledgement of what had remained hidden for weeks. Miranda gasped. David's eyes widened. The office fell into a sudden hush. Everyone seemed to hear. Blake's expression softened, professional restraint giving way to genuine emotion. "How long have you been thinking about this step?" "Since Maui," Bianca admitted. "That's when I realized what happens when an author needs a protector, someone who understands both the art and the business." A slow smile spread across Blake's face. It wasn't a corporate smile. It was real, warm, the smile of a man she had fallen for. "You would make an exceptional agent." "I think so," she replied, returning his smile. The effect of their revelation was already rippling through the office. Whispers, glances, gossip spreading fast enough to engulf the industry by morning. Miranda had vanished, likely to share the news with Gerald. "Well," Blake said, taking her hand, in a gesture that left no doubt to anyone still questioning, "looks like we've made our statement." Bianca interlaced her fingers with his, fully disregarding professional conventions. "Not exactly the way we planned," she said. "But better," he said softly. "Sincere. By your rules." The weight that had pressed on Bianca's chest for weeks vanished in an instant. The path ahead wasn't without challenges, transitions, adjustments, new professional identities to establish. But the central conflict, the fundamental incompatibility of their positions, had a solution that preserved her autonomy while allowing their relationship to exist openly. "I love you," she whispered. Speaking openly in a public space gave the words extra weight. Blake's eyes darkened with emotion. "I love you too, enough to face whatever comes next, together." Whatever comes next. The phrase carried layers of meaning, professional changes, industry gossip, the merging of two lives that had begun in opposition and transformed into something unexpected. Yet, standing together among literary elites, holding hands in quiet defiance of corporate politics, Bianca felt only certainty. Some stories refuse to follow the expected structure. Some relationships defy conventional beginnings. And sometimes, the most unexpected manuscripts become true masterpieces. A year later. From the corner office at Westbridge Literary Agency, Bianca's view stretched across the Manhattan skyline, the autumn sun painting the buildings gold. On her desk sat a framed copy of Publishers Weekly, announcing a record-breaking deal between a Westbridge agent and a debut author, a writer Bianca had especially championed. A former nurse whose manuscript had been rejected by 12 publishers before Bianca recognized its potential, she had worked with the author to refine the text and orchestrated an auction that secured a 7-figure contract. Not with Harrington Publishing, notably. Blake had made his boundaries clear. Bianca's clients received no special treatment, no hidden advantages. Their professional reputations were far too important to compromise. Bianca's phone buzzed. Lunch finished early, still on for lunch? She smiled, dialing quickly. Of course, as always. Their usual spot was a small cafe inside a bookstore, midway between their offices, a neutral territory that had become their favorite meeting place. Blake was already there, flipping through a book by one of Bianca's clients, freshly published. "Impressive work," he said, standing to greet her with a quick kiss. "The transformation in the third act is particularly well executed." "The author did the heavy lifting. I just suggested the structure," Bianca replied, settling across from him and accepting the coffee Blake had already ordered. "How did the board meeting go?" "Productive. The digital initiatives are performing better than projected." Their conversation flowed effortlessly between personal and professional topics, the rhythm of their partnership well established over the year spent navigating their unique circumstances. The industry had quickly adapted to their relationship, first the whispers, then acceptance, and eventually such normalcy that their earlier secrecy now seemed almost quaint. "I have news," Blake said as they finished lunch. "My proposal for the Tennessee property got approved." Bianca's eyes widened. "The one with the creek and meadow you loved?" "That's the one," he said, his expression softening. 20 acres, a 19th century farmhouse needing full restoration, complete privacy. Perfect. They had both fallen for the land during a weekend in Nashville while Bianca was representing an author at a literary festival. Blake was captivated by the natural beauty, Bianca by the history etched into the worn structures. "There's something else," Blake continued, reaching into his jacket pocket. "I've been carrying this for weeks, waiting for the right moment." He placed a small velvet box on the table between them. Bianca's breath caught. "Blake, I'm not getting engaged in a cafe," she said, half laughing. He smiled, a subtle twitch at the corner of his mouth. "Not yet." Inside the box was a ring unlike anything Bianca would have expected from a man of Blake's wealth and status. No massive diamond, no elaborate setting, just a vintage emerald surrounded by small sapphires. The design was both unique and timeless. "It reminds me of you," Blake said softly. "Beautiful, one of a kind, with hidden depths that reveal themselves over time." Bianca reached out to touch the ring, her fingers trembling slightly. It's extraordinary. Just like us. Blake closed the box and slid it back into his pocket. This weekend, when we visit the property as its owners for the first time, he said, maybe under the oak by the creek, we can talk about making it permanent. His indirect proposal was classic Blake, thoughtful, romantic but not sentimental, respectful of her independence, yet clearly declaring his intentions. I think that would be perfect, Bianca said, her heart swelling with the realization of how far they had come since that first stormy night in Maui. Walking back to their offices, hands intertwined under the autumn sun, Bianca reflected on the unexpected manuscript of their relationship, how it began with conflict, evolved through challenges, and arrived at a resolution that honored both their individual stories and their shared one. Like the best books, their story was one of transformation, not one character changing to fit the other, but two people growing together, discovering not only passion, but partnership, not just romance, but respect. And when Blake kissed her goodbye at the corner where their paths temporarily diverged, Bianca knew with complete certainty that their story was only beginning. The first, chapters of their joint masterpiece written together one page at a time.